The tragic ending of John Holmes and the Wonderland murders. He was only 43 years old. At the end of his lengthy career, John Holmes would find himself down and out, reduced to an emaciated cocaine addict who resorted to breaking into cars and stealing luggage from LAX airport to support his gigantic coke habit. Holmes would eventually meet up with Palestinian Adel Nasrallah, a flamboyant nightclub owner, also known as Eddie Nash. Some may remember the shockingly accurate portrayal of Nash by Alfred Molina in the 1997 adult film industry satire, Boogie Nights. He was the drug dealer who would prance around his house in robe and Speedo to the music of Night Ranger's Sister Christian. Anyway, Nash was a huge drug dealer by the late 70s and would often sell to the patrons of his clubs, Kit Kat and Starwood, the latter of which once featured such bands as Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, and Van Halen. One of his most reliable clients, however, was John Holmes, who would spend nearly $75,000 on cocaine in one particular year in the late 70s. But with his adult film career now just limping along, Holmes would see his habit grow and his fortune dwindle, a dangerous and apparently deadly combination of circumstances. In the spring of 1991, Holmes was hanging out with the Wonderland gang, sleeping in the house for nights at a time. But despite his prior notoriety and fame, he was really just a hanger-on who the gang viewed as nothing more than an errand boy and house monkey. He was a joke to them. But his value was in his connection to Nash, and Holmes was willing to help them set up a hit on the drug lord's Studio City mansion. Holmes informed the Wonderland gang that on a previous visit to Nash's house, he had left the sliding glass door unlocked and that Nash kept loads of drugs, jewelry, and cash on hand. Holmes even drew up a map of the house for the crew. Accounts vary widely as to who and how many actually did the job, but on the morning of June 29, 1981, 3 or 4 men, DeVerrell, Lanius, Lynn, and an accomplice named Tracy McCourt would let themselves in through the unlocked door, identify themselves as policemen, and handcuff Nash's 300-pound bodyguard, Gregory Diles. Diles was also loosely depicted in Boogie Nights. But while handcuffing him, one of the preparators' guns would go off, waking Nash in his bedroom. Thinking he was about to be killed, Nash would drop to his knees, open the safe, and beg for mercy. The crew fled with drugs, jewelry, and cash totaling about $185,000. The U.S. Department of Justice would later estimate the take at approximately $1 million. They had hit Nash and hit him hard. But an even bigger sting was that they had humiliated him. Once back at the Wonderland house, the crew would divide the take amongst themselves. In the process, shortchanging Holmes and McCourt. Furious at not only having been robbed, but humiliated as well, Nash would vow revenge. And his chief suspect was John Holmes. It seems that Holmes was spotted by some of Nash's associates walking around in Hollywood wearing a piece of jewelry stolen from his home. It is believed that under the orders of Nash, Dials, and a couple of others, one of whom may or may not have been Holmes, would break into the house at 8763 Wonderland with serrated steel pipes in hand, and systematically proceed from room to room, bashing in the skulls of the occupants. When it was all said and done, 4 people would be killed and another gravely injured. Neighbors reported hearing the commotion, but rather than call the police, they just figured it was another riotous night of partying. So one neighbor just turned up the TV to drown out the noise. As the prowlers entered the house, they would first kill Barbara Richardson, Lynn's 22-year-old girlfriend, sleeping in the downstairs living room. Her body would be discovered in front of a sofa, half covered with a pink and white bedspread. She was just visiting the Wonderland house and unfortunately was caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. So sad. In the rear downstairs bedroom, the killers would happen upon Ronald Launius and his wife, Susan, whose moans would later grab the attention of the mover. She was beaten and terribly mutilated, but still alive and breathing. The killers then crept upstairs, where they beat Miller to death on her bed. Her boyfriend, Deverell, would be found lying in a corner of the same room, dead from a massive skull injury. Police were so overwhelmed by the amount of blood at the crime scene that they decided to videotape it. Remember that video cameras were relatively new at the time. The video would eventually be used during the trial, marking the first time in American history that video was used as evidence in a criminal trial. The actual police footage with narration can be seen as an extra feature on the DVD release of Wonderland starring Val Kilmer. One of the Wonderland residents just happened to be in the right place at the right time. David Lynn was apparently spending the night with a hooker in a sleazy motel in the San Fernando Valley where he dealt some drugs earlier that night. Who says prostitution doesn't pay? During a police interrogation, Lynn would eventually spill the beans about the Nash break-in and its possible connection to the horrible cases. The police now had something to work with. One question that went unanswered, however, was where Holmes was during all the commotion. In later years, Holmes would reveal to his wife Sharon that the revenge seekers forced him to accompany them and watch the cases. Though he claims to not having participated in the actual killings, a handprint was found on the headboard of a bed in one of the bedrooms. Soon after the cases, however, Holmes would flee to Florida with his girlfriend and refused to talk to police about that night. But working with the evidence of the handprint, the police would eventually charge Holmes with the cases and asked him to squeal on Nash. But Holmes didn't want to play that game. A jury acquitted Holmes of the case charges on June 16, 1982. He refused to cooperate with authorities on the ongoing investigation, however, and would even spend a little time in the pokey for contempt of court. On March 13, 1988, at a VA medical center, Holmes would succumb to the ravages of AIDS. He was but 43 years of age. In the few short weeks before his death, police were by his deathbed hoping to elicit a confession about the Wonderland case. Holmes would say nothing, however. John Holmes had one final request of his wife, Lori Holmes, before he died. He requested that she ensure his body was intact before being cremated. Rest in peace, John Holmes. Goodbye.